Another video from our awesome trip. We made it to Newport, Rhode Island. The actual area was founded in 1639. It's known for its Gilded Age mansions, and there were beautiful houses everywhere. One bit of advice for you RVers: if you can help it, do not tow your RV into Newport, Rhode Island. I made that mistake, and it was not fun. But the neighborhoods are beautiful and the houses are outstanding. One of the most famous mansions out here is the Breakers. It was built in 1895. The details on that gate were just amazing. But I sure wouldn't want to mow that lawn. A lot of these mansions are right on the water. Gorgeous views out over the Atlantic. And this path is open to the public, so you can walk along the waterfront and see all these immaculate houses. Ochre Court was built in 1892. Pretty fancy house. It was eventually turned over by the family to the university that's here in Newport, Rhode Island. And it is still used today as part of the university. The water was so clear. And I believe that's a McLaren 720S. Don't see those parked on the side of the road very often. And as an added benefit, we saw a cute little lighthouse crossing the bridge. The Mark Twain house. The house and the man are full of a colorful history. This was built in 1874. Mark Twain and his family lived there from 1874 to 1891. Some of the books he wrote while living at the house were The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Prince and the Pauper, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. The house was sold in 1903, and between 1903 and 1929, it acted as a school for a time, an apartment building, and also a library. In 1929, it was slated to be demolished. That's when the public stepped up and turned it into a museum and had a museum there built on site as well. One of his neighbors was Harriet Beecher-Stowe. She's best known for her book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. That house was built in 1833. This house, I don't even recall the actual owner of it. It's the Katherine Seymour Day House. It was built in 1884. The neighbor who built it wanted to compete stylistically with the Twains, hence the way the house is designed. Now it's the administration center and library for the Harriet Beecher-Stowe Center. Pretty fancy house. New York City. Sure glad we stayed where we did. So one of those things that, looking back, I kind of thought I'd never actually be physically looking at the Statue of Liberty. She was a gift from France to the U.S. and dedicated October 28, 1886. She'd been standing in that harbor for quite a long time. It was an amazing sight to see. Just so cool to actually be there and see her in person. Then on our way back to camp, we swung through Orange, New Jersey, and stopped at the Thomas Edison National Park. The factory was designed in 1887, and Thomas Edison actually used this site for over 40 years. It was a lot bigger previously until a fire took out a good portion of the factory, but these buildings here remained and were used even after the fire. Things to come from this lab were the motion picture camera, the improved phonographs, sound recordings, silent and sound movies, and the nickel iron alkylide batteries. It was amazing how much this man was involved in the inventing and creating of so many different things.
I'm going to lower the needle. It's been curved underneath, so it's in the box here. And let's see, lower the needle.
It was really neat to see and hear those old phonographs. It's amazing they still have cylinders that will play on those old things. This was the chemistry lab outside of the main laboratory. That's the time clock. And Thomas Edison himself was insistent that he himself, even being the boss, clocked in and clocked out just like everybody else. So many neat artifacts in this national park. This was Thomas Edison's office/library. The interesting part about it is he did not spend a lot of time in here, as he'd rather be in the lab working on experiments and trying new things or helping out his staff. And that roll-top desk there, when he died, was locked up and nothing from it was removed, and years later it was opened back up and gone through, and those are the things that were left on his desk when he died. I think the neat part about this library is Thomas Edison made this entire library available to all of his employees for research or their needs for the projects that they were working on. All of them had full access to all of these books and all the information here. And that bed there in the corner was for Thomas Edison himself when he put in a late night and needed to get some shut-eye. He didn't have to go home, he just curled up in the corner. Love that old staircase. 3 floors, and every floor was filled with books. That is a square foot cube of copper. Funny little story with it was he had a group ask him what he wanted, and he asked for that, but he knew that you cannot pour copper into that big of a chunk because just the way it reacts when it's being poured. So even though it is a square foot of copper, it does not weigh the right amount because there's actually not as much copper there just because they couldn't do it. And I guess it was one of Thomas Edison's favorite things he ever got. So this is the main factory. This first floor here is where a lot of the bigger machining projects were taken care of. The machining equipment was just amazing. All run by the pulleys you can see up by the ceiling. Lathes, presses, machining tables. Just amazing. It looks like if you fired up the old motors and turned the belts that all of this stuff would probably work. Even the staircase was pretty darn impressive. Especially when you consider it's just the factory's staircase. The second floor was more machining, but this was tighter tolerance type machining for the smaller, more intricate pieces that needed to be more exact. And then in the back of this floor was also some offices and laboratories that were used. And this one also looked like if you fired up the motors that everything would probably work. It was really neat to see all of the different equipment and a workbench that obviously has been used a lot through the years. You gotta wonder what kind of inventions went across that table back in the day. This is one of the labs on the second floor. And when the employees couldn't find him, it sounds like he was in this or other labs on that second floor. This is the music room at the end of the second floor. A lot of recordings were actually made here. And it was amazing in this next room to see all the different sizes and shapes of horns used for amplifying sound of different instruments to get a better recording. I didn't even know this many different horns existed. And this is the third floor. There are so many really neat examples of the inventions and tools and things that they designed and built here in the shop. And you look in the back and there's just shelf upon shelf of cataloged items that the normal public doesn't even get to see, because there's just so much at this national park. There's just so many things to look at, so much information to take in. It was a real neat experience. I'm very, very glad we went there. This was established as a museum in 1948 and then dedicated as a national park in 2009. It's still kind of overwhelming to see all the different things that were designed, created, and built right there in that factory. And this big apparatus here with a really big horn was one of, I believe his son worked on this one. And it was like the first electric diaphragm controlled amplified horn. Here's some of the old light bulbs that were designed and built in-house. Nothing like you see today. Then outside there was also other buildings for chemistry, physics, metallurgy. There's even a wood shop. They made practically everything in-house